but now the recording is in progress. And yeah, a warm welcome to everyone to this demo hour, the second demo hour of this year. Just shortly, what is a demo hour? What are we doing today? What's kind of planned? If you haven't been to a demo hour, it's a format that we started roughly a year ago as part of the Foresight Europe Network. And we'll just mute someone and hearing an echo. And yeah, basically the idea is to share practices, to exchange knowledge, to have discussions with each other. And we always have one person, one member normally from the network stepping on stage of these demo hours, these 1 hour to 1.5 sessions to present a method or an approach that they are using. And then basically that's the starting point of the network to engage with it. And today we have Ana Povoas, I think. This is roughly how I pronounce the last name. You are a researcher. Your topic is spatial justice. This is also the headline of today's demo hour. You're affiliated with the Université Libre de Bruxelles, roughly said. And yeah, I think there's much more to you and about the method that we will learn today. I'm very, very excited. We had a small discussion with you leading to this demo hour today. And yeah, you will share your knowledge. We will have time for questions, for discussions, as always, plenty of that. And then we should roughly end in an hour to latest 1.5. Let's see how the discussion is unfolding. And with that, Ana, I will give it to you. The stage is yours.
Thanks. Thanks, Lena. Thanks for creating this format, which is really interesting. It's the first time I'm participating. Also, I've never followed before one of your events like this. But anyway, I'm very glad to be here, present a little bit of my work on spatial justice, and also try to animate the discussion. So I'll try to be brief. It's not always easy to choose what to talk about, so I have plenty of slides, and maybe I'll run a bit faster on some of them, depending a little bit how I also feel the group, because I've planned a part where you can actually give a little bit of input. Sorry, I'm just trying to share my slides, but I think as I had two things open. Okay, now I'm the right one. Please. Now disappear the button where here.
The sharing button disappeared.
Yeah. Is it okay? Do you see the first slide?
We can see it.
So this was just to illustrate the music, but if you can always say something later about it. What I really like to start with is a little bit of my background, because I am not a Foresight trained person. So initially I have an architect and urban planner master. I then was a practitioner, and only then around 2010 did I started to do research in a program which tries to bridge social science and studies around the city, so urban planning, architecture, urban studies. And then I did a series of postdocs, mainly in France and Belgium. And today I'm actually shifting roles. And so by coming here today, I want to share my experience, but also seek your advice on how these spatial justice ideas and tools can be useful in Foresight. And this is just an experience which I had, which informed a little bit all the rest I'm going to present today. And it consists on the scientific observation of the convention, Citizen Convention for Climate in France. And today, so this is a little bit the points I'm going to go through, just to give you an idea of how I want to balance things up. But the first thing I would like was to ask the people that chose to be here today, what do you think that spatial justice can bring to your foresight practice. It's just like that. Just maybe you know a lot about spatial justice. Maybe you just heard it in the title of the demo hour. But the idea is really for me to have a first feeling about what it is that resonates with you. Of course, this is a compound question, which actually implies telling me in 30 seconds, what do you think spatial justice is? 30 seconds, what your practice is about, and 30 seconds, why do you think that there is some interest in hearing about it? So I was thinking we could spend 10 minutes with this. So just really a small tour de table, like the French say. Leonard, I let you see who is asking for the word.
Yeah, and I think we can also use the chat for that if you don't want to speak up, but you already, we already have a raising hand. Easy.
Hi, Ana. I came across spatial justice well over 20 years, 25 years ago in college. Law and social thought interdisciplinary program was creating partnerships with numerous disciplines. And one discipline that I never understood was geography and urban planning. So I asked my professor, I could understand anthropology, sociology, but why urban planning and why geography? And he said it's all to do with how the social services are provided, and I guess you practically determines people's lifespan and quality of life. What is my practice about? I am a crisis management expert, so I use foresight in trying to anticipate and make systems more resilient, both in means of security and in several other domains. Why am I here today? It is I believe in the importance of spatial justice. To learn more. Thank you.
We have one comment in the chat from Amos. And I don't know if you can see that, otherwise I can read it out.
Try to go there.
I can say we think in temporalities generally, but of course now we're investigating in this TE Winning Spaces project in Finland on the futures of work, but from considering the spatial aspects. So there's this combination of the temporal and spatial is very interesting, and actually it opens up our subject area, which is the future of work, which has been overly done in a new way.
Fantastic.
And I'm a futures researcher.
Anyone else?
Paula.
Thank you. I'm also part of the TE Winning Spaces project that Amos just explained. And I think the spatial justice theme is really interesting. I don't know a lot about it, but a couple of years back, the book Invisible Woman by Caroline Criado Perez, it was really, really eye-opening and really interesting. So based on that, mostly like urban planning and it was something that stick to my mind, but I'm also really interested in kind of bodily knowledge, embodied knowledge. So that's also really interesting. I'm not quite sure how these two, spatial justice and embodied knowledge, go together, but I think there is some kind of link. So yeah, I'm really interested in the in the theme. So happy to be here.
That a bit, I suppose.
Oh, I can go if you want another opinion.
Yeah, sure.
I was wondering, I'm not an expert of spatial justice, but I think it's somehow related to access and opportunities in relation to different fields. I know it can be somehow impacted by decision in urban planning and so forth. So I suppose that's what it relates about. I'm also involved somehow in the TE Winning Spaces project by the Finland colleagues here, because they circa interviewed me for the project. I'm a sort of expert there. I work with the Millennium Project as a communication director. I work for the Foresight Europe Network. as communication officer, and that's why I'm here today. I'm curious about the topic, and I support the Foresight Europe Network. Thank you.
Thanks.
We have one last comment in the chat from Abius. Spatial justice is for me the fair and equitable distribution and access to social space for expression and interaction without limitation. That continues, but we cannot read it. So embodiment of physical and mental space, really. And we have another hand up from Mariana.
Thank you. Sorry, my camera is not working for some reason. So I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Turku in Finland, and a colleague from many of the others who are here. And I'm working with spatial scenarios, and my focus is in Brazilian Amazonia. And for my doctoral dissertation, I have been conducting participatory mapping, PGIS, for the creation of scenarios, and adding the spatial layer as one of the CLA layers in my scenarios. So I'm interested in seeing what Ana is doing and what is her approach, and learning from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that is it. You tell me if I'm wrong. So this is I had to choose an entry point to start unpacking what I have to share. And I think that participation is really the linking point between what I'm doing and what Foresight is doing according to my knowledge of the field. And participation has been going on in planning and architecture and spatial studies for a while. And we could say that the spatial angle brings about the focus on the ways in which people live or want to live, inhabit, which is modern living, our common world. This is what some geography calls the spatial dimension of society. So you can see that it is both an existential and a political question. And to my knowledge, most methods are not equipped to deal with the actual political divisiveness, which is attached to these topics of inhabiting and making sense of how we take a place in the world and in society as a whole. So that is really where I try to bring something. So you can all sense conflict and tension easily. This is just a picture that I took very recently. So here the tension can be between tourist practices and the demands of more permanent residents, or the demands of these more residents and night life users of the city. This is an image where people are saying that someone wrote, there's no sustainable mobility without safety. So you can feel the tension between car users and inhabitants seeking other mobility forms, which are also other haptic experiences. And here we can feel the tension between the objectives of increasing the access to the right to housing and issues of inequality and spatial segregation. So this is actually a call for a manifestation on the housing solution for the housing crisis that is actually currently hitting Porto very strongly. So this picture that taken in Portugal, Portugal. So spatial justice in a nutshell, it intends to be a tool set to deal with such divergence, acknowledging that the dissensus is often twofold. So it is a disagreement on values, the values which are underlining the kind of society people want to live in. And it is a disagreement on matters of knowledge. The way that people read a problem is part of our difficulty to actually have a common diagnosis on what the problem is. Because if in the cities we have access, direct access to the expression of an injustice. It doesn't mean that it is a monoscalar problem. Most of the cases, it's both local, national, European, and world scales, which are intertwined, and we need to understand those sources of injustice in order to identify leverage for change. And of course, in participatory practices, where if you succeed to have around the table people with very different educational and cultural capitals, you'll have very different diagnoses of the problem. So, though the FEN Hour is mostly to share methods, I would like to very quickly set up the context of where this method has taken root, which is in a collective research program which started at EPFL, so École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. And so we wanted to develop a theory that would enable this political treatment of diversity in urbanism and spatial planning, mostly through what we call a legitimate co-construction of a spatial contract. And at the heart of legitimacy, there was a little a different way of taking people as information providers. So we were not resorting them as spatial users, but as spatial inhabitants and citizens simultaneously. So instead of asking them about their needs, about their personal preferences, about their expertise as users, which is what is often in stake in exercises of participation, we were open to both permanent, temporary, and even future inhabitants in our methods. We were focusing on aspirations and projects, both with collective and personal dimensions to it, trying to liaise cognitive and affective elements. And instead of putting the participants in a position of complaining and in a position where the justice would be a direct response to that request, to that complaint, we try to liaise both the right to propose and the responsibility that comes with it. So we try to protect the method from what is called an NIMBY effect, which is the not in my backyard kind of logics, and developed more ethical ways of participating. And all of this work is synthesized in a book which was published in 2018, French only, I'm afraid. And the departure point is a way to define it is to say that we took a slightly different approach from most scholarship on the notion of spatial justice by not choosing a particular author of justice with whom to affiliate. So, for example, here it's an illustration, David Harvey, Social Justice in the City. He kind of divides his book into two parts, one which is the most liberal part, where he tries to work out what justice in the city is by reflecting on two particular authors, Stuart Mill and John Rawls. And then in a second part, he develops a Marxist approach, and it is his point of view and his ethical choice on which theory is the best, that is the way to try to untangle the spatial dimension of justice. And you can see that in other authors as well. So what we tried to do was to try to have that encounter of the discourses of justice, which are in books, and the discourses of justice, which are in people's minds, to have that encounter in the field work that we were doing. And in reaching this more dialogical approach, we were very much illuminated by a book that was coming out at that time, which was the Amartya Sen's, The Idea of Justice, which has this very dialogical view of justice and tries to really navigate an enormous amount of literature on the topic, and including Indian references, and trying to define the idea of freedom and the idea of equality as very encompassing concepts, which have multiple dimensions, which are intertwined, and insisting pretty much on the idea that justice can only be defined by the society it is serving, and not by researchers. So this is pretty much what we try to do in a series of projects And here I will just give one quick illustration about what I did in my PhD. So this is just to say that I really tried to explore, it's pretty much what I just said, the way that people we interviewed talk about spatial justice, and the way that the authors, the philosophy authors, articulate their thought. And by going back and forth between theory and practice, you're actually understanding better both the philosophers, because they didn't talk about space and cities, and the inhabitants we were talking with. And then I came at a crossroad, which has multiple facets, but mostly it consisted into stopping a little bit the theoretical work and trying to put in practice a lot of what I have already identified as interesting premises. So I did that by conceiving and directing several pilot projects which attempt to organize such processes of defining what a more just space would be about. And the future is that we go from individual interviews, which are one-shot encounters, to more dynamic and continuous processes. And the one where I would like to focus a little bit more today is actually an ongoing project in the Bassin Minier du Nord Pas-de-Calais. So it is this area in the north of France, one of the poorest in France, which suffered a lot from the closure of the coal mines and has been struggling since to find a vocation, despite millions of euros which have been invested from regional and national funds, and European as well. And so this has yet another exploratory dimension to it, is that filmmaking with the citizens is structuring the process as well. And so, as I said, it's continuous work. So we could afford 8 sessions in presence to work together. And this was punctured with homework, which was done before, during, in between the sessions, and still ongoing after the in-presence meetings have finished. So just to give you a little bit of example of how I went about it. So people would film what is important for them in their habitat, in their way of living. It could be a negative thing, it could be a positive thing, and that would be brought in into the session. And then we would project that video and then discuss that video and start organizing those images and the content that was coming from those images in some sort of a matrix, where we would have what is negative and should be definitely changed, and what is positive and could be further developed, and then what is shared in the group of the present people, and what is not shared at all, and where the census would be the correct way to see it at the moment of the discussion. So after that, we move forward and we try to nourish from that ongoing discussion coming from the movies, we start to have lots of ideas. So it's a variable project, but which identifies 11 topics that could be developed into a project for a more just territory. And then the citizens go and try to interview stakeholders, which can be here, it's like a mayor, which have managed to create a cycling lane in a place where there was no road bid for that. And this is a teenager that was here to represent what would adolescents would like to, as spaces dedicated for them. And as part of this knowledge input, we also had a session from a jurist who came and explained how the territorial making actual is done in France. What are the tools? What are the actors? What are the governance systems, so that the participants have an idea of how their project fits in relation to the institutional and also some informal ways of doing the territory. And it is only then that we come to spatial justice. So I've proposed the concepts that I have defined that I have defined from my scholarship on spatial justice, and I conceive them as some sort of bricks whose content, whose empirical content is to be proposed by the citizen. So this is a little bit abstract because I have to first try to explain them what's a primary good, what's an individual opportunity, what's a public good, what would be liberties, who in this scenario of a more just space becoming compatible with justice, but individuals the participants kind of grasp what it is about. So this is the assignment that I gave them. So we're trying to visualize the values that you want to support through your project for a more just territory. So to begin with, I had analyzed what they had said in the previous days, and I had prepared the contents myself, and so they would just try to put it in the right place. And then as the session unfolds, they would do it in a more free way. So it was a little bit difficult at the beginning, but collectively they could kind of work their way through it. And we did it for 4 of the 11 topics that had emerged from these films. And these are the topics so this was a mix of discussion and voting, and these were the topics that had been selected for further development. So based on this work, and this is where Foresight enters in the process in a more, how shall I put it, in a more vivid way, maybe. So individuals participating were asked to write a narrative of what their inhabiting would look like in 2044. And after that, I would connect the content of what they had brought to the values and the content that had emerged from the session on spatial justice. And I asked them to compose one single narrative that would reflect either the agreements that they had come up to or the tensions that were still characterizing this group mindset. So here you can see, so this is pretty much a series of steps that I'm compressing here. So we had these very long sessions around these planches where you could put the Lego bricks. Then I analyzed the full content of that and proposed some diagrams, synthetic diagrams, which we also converted into animated forms and shared with the citizens. Then the citizens wrote their texts. Then we analyzed their text and attached it to the diagrams. And then we proposed all this work to them for comment and further work. So this is actually the path. So starting to present, first session, presenting oneself, second session, preparing the narrative that they would want to go out in their territory and film. Then session 3 and 4, debating on those movies to start to identify the topics of a project for their habitat. Then nourishing the project with further information coming from both academia and from citizens' attempts to interview stakeholders. They had a lot of difficulty finding people to do that with. Then the debate of spatial justice, and then the telling of the future of the territory. And these are the homework they had to do in between. And what they are doing right now is to rewrite their original narrative to integrate the collective scenario that we worked in the last ateliers of collective work. So what I have done was to try to guide them through a series of hats that they have to hold while they are thinking and participating. So at the beginning, they come mostly as a person, so they have their own subjective spatial preferences that they bring. Then, through the forming of the group and through the debate, their spatial choices become more collective and the political dimension of it becomes more and more evident. Then we have this moment of explicitness of the divergence or agreement with the spatial justice tool. And then you have the foresight part of it. So they put a new hat, which is the inhabitant person in the future. And then we work our way into the inhabitant person citizen in the future. So at the beginning, we progress towards a more collective stance. And then in the last part of the loop, the individual and the collective stances began to become more aligned, or at least that is the objective. We'll see where they get with this homework, which is still ongoing. So some important innovations here. So we have created and defined a vocabulary of concepts, which are actually justice values, coming from a wide range of theories of justice. We try to teach this in a very pedagogical way to citizens. We let citizens decide the empirical, that is the real work, the real world content they assign to each brick. We help to identify where they agree and where the tensions are. We use this collective work as a support for their own writing of future scenarios. And then we do all of these while also doing a scientific experimental film. And the reason why we do a film, I can tell it already, is that these processes are depending on the constitution of a collective, which is then very difficult to communicate to the wider civil society that stayed outside the process. So the idea is that by creating an object which can be shared, because that is the main objective of a film is to be shared, and we can continue to nourish the debate and fuel new encounters on the topics. So now I will very, very quickly go through another project, which is like a flash method that contrasts with the one I've just been describing, has a very different role in the territorial construction. The idea is that it takes, so while the one I just told you about was a research project for which I had constructed a network of actors which are on the field and which are interested in following the project, and even maybe give it a political ear. Here, it's the political representatives of the territory who mandated a person to go and look for research input at the very beginning of their revision of their coherent planning tool, which is in French is called a SCOT, Schéma de cohérence territoriale, so a scheme of territorial coherence. So I'll run through it. What I want to show is mainly that we can go about these preoccupations that I have and this use of spatial justice in a lot of different ways. So nothing is very rigid about it. It was like a very short fieldwork. So there was a lot which was done just by walking in the field and in selected areas. So nothing was arbitrary. There was also a 2 hours workshop on spatial justice. So here the process was different because as we had to generate content to work with very quickly, I had proposed a series of cards which had an image of a neighborhood and then some aerial views which would allow the participants to have a sense of the density, and immediately people have to, I was asking them to classify as great, not even dream about it, or okay. So that's what you see in these in this wall. So what I wanted to show is that the same solution can be placed in the 3 categories depending on the people. So the idea was to show how existential and political it is in half an hour, and then from there, what the same process that I've explained, that is, I would very quickly teach them the concepts of spatial justice, and they would start identifying what is which in the content that they have just generated. And then I would complement that by interviews with people that I would meet in specific places on those walks that I've mentioned. So while in the project that the first one, so the one of the bassin minier, we're talking about more than 6 months of fieldwork and more than 2.5 years of research altogether. The second one is a 4 days project of on-site work, because of course there is a lot of preparation and a lot of analytical work which is done afterwards. Both are done at the functional area, meaning it is not one single neighborhood, it's not a municipality. It's always trying to go about the what in French is called the bassin de vie. So it is the area where actually people are interrelated by the way in which they use a public system, a housing market, a school network, a health network, a cultural offer. So that's the minimum area where the complexity of urbanism manifests today. So even if it's very difficult, that's always there, even if we just have 4 days to work about. So the sampling method of the people which I tried to get around the table. So in the very quick project, I use available maps and I try to see where are the different densities, where are the different political opinions, where are the different economic levels. And when I have more time, I do my own mapping with the indicators that I find fit. The definition of topics of debate, so narrower when we have less time, larger when we have more time. And the role of the researcher in the input. So in this flash method, I am a producer of insights, and myself, I wrote a Foresight narrative because that was actually part of the mandate. While on the second K, on which I actually presented first, I am an analyst of what is produced, I am a mediator, but I myself don't choose any of the Foresight contents, which can actually be quite frustrating because what sits in the shoes is not necessarily the most interesting from my perspective, knowing what is on the debate right now. And then the researcher's implication on the follow-up of what is done with these results is also very different, very low impact on the non-Saint-Nazaire project, where I just send my deliverables and that's it. They do whatever they see and whatever they see fit, sorry. And then in the case of the Bassin Minier, I've actually constructed relationships and bridges with the local people which have influence on how things are done. So I keep giving the results to them, and we are still investigating possibilities to do this in other areas of the Bassin Minier. We are going to bring the results to a citizen council, which is mandated to follow up the implementation of their current scheme of territorial coherence. So there are much more bridges, so there is much more potential for a real world impact of the insights that we try to produce. So there's actually a teamwork. I'm talking as a presenter here today on an individual conjugation, but this teamwork. And here I will send you the slides. So here there is a little bit more information on the method of Nantes, which I had to gloss over. And so to make a synthesis of what could be the main attributes of a spatial justice tool set. So there is this idea that we treat the participants both as inhabitants, but also as citizens. So we couple their political responsibility with their political freedom. We try to cultivate a dialect that takes on board all their embedded personal experience, which is actually an innovation in relation to this very influential theory of justice, which is John Rawls' theory of justice, which associates the idea of impartiality with the possibility to forget who one is in social life. So that's actually not how things are done in reality. So we accept that. We accept that people always bring a stance which is personal and contextualized and which is historically situated, but that is not a problem if we also open up space for welcoming other people's perspective and new information. And that's through that process that we're going to seek something that is deontologically strong or stronger than just let personal interest develop on a free ride. So there is always this idea of looking towards the horizon of future possibilities, the scale, very important as I mentioned, the representativeness of society, which we are working with. Of course, these are qualitative methods, so we cannot have a statistical representativeness, but the idea is to look for diversity on at least socioeconomic profiles and political visions. These I've already mentioned. This also, and these also. And before the field work, so there is a lot of work to be done as well. The funding, of course, the literature review, which gives us a reading of what's going on in this territory, what are the existing policies, what is it that local actors already know about, so that we don't come with common sense information for them. So the partnerships I told you about, which I found are really important, and the cartography, which can have varying degrees of refinement depending on the budget and on the time. But I'm about to finish this, but I would like just to maybe share something which is not that intuitive in foresight practices, which is the idea that though we know that there is a lot of divisiveness going on about what people want for space, maybe you don't know that this divisiveness has a spatial pattern to it. And political cartography reveals this polarization which is specialized for a number of topics. And often the voting behavior of the city is contrasting with the city center, I would say. So the city center and suburbs is contrasting with what we call the peri-urban, so the more diffuse urban system that gravitates around city centers and suburbs. And this is the case for a number of voting analyses, referendums. We did a full atlas on this. And here is just an example, which now it's dating already from 2009, of a Swiss referendum, which was consulting on the idea of banning the construction of new minarets, Muslim minarets, in Switzerland. And the yes, so voting for yes, let's ban it, was so mostly around the city centers, as you see in the purple areas, and no, this is nonsense, was mostly in the urban contexts. Of course, this is an approximation, but it leads us to the importance of not just staying with either suburbs, either peri-urban, or either central areas, because there's a likelihood that people that chose to live there will also share some elements of political orientation. And if we don't have a crossing sampling of the participants, we can miss out on this important challenge. So this is actually the study I did for the bassin minier. So the bassin minier is it's this white dotted line, but you can see there are several urban systems in it. Is a study of the mobility, so it shows a certain interdependence of some municipal area. So it's a commune. So I would say that's a municipality in English. And so we've studied a part of it, the one of Bethune-Bruay. Attaching to it also some isolated areas, because those areas bring other topics like the ones of isolation and lack of access to a certain services and opportunities. So that was important for our topic. And then when we do that, we go and try to look for people in the several identified zones. So we look for diversity in density, electoral behavior, revenues, and also indicators of quality of life. So now I would like to open the discussion, but I've actually also identified a few difficulties that are probably common to some of your practices. And so I thought that if we lay this ground, then maybe we can go into more detailed conversation immediately after. So in terms of the diversity, it is difficult to get some people to participate. Even when they accept, it's difficult to keep them on board. And even when we keep them on board, there is a problem of framing the ethical behavior that we expect, because if there is racism and xenophobia in our societies, and if we're trying to get processes participated by also those radical views, it's likely that those views come up during the exchanges. Actually, in this example, it was not that much during the formal exchanges, because I had set up a code of ethics, but during the informal sociability around a drink at the end and a snack, though there was some unacceptable behaviors, which actually led to the group to kind of be very critical and exclude the person from the rest of the person decide not to come again, not to be subject to criticism like that. So the other problem is that if we don't get these people to participate in these research experimentations, how can we know if this would work if we actually could sample more people which are poorer and with less education. Then another challenge concerns knowledge input. So it is difficult to convince researchers to come to nourish the debate when the scope is so open, meaning that by the time that we know what people are going to talk about, researchers have their agendas fully defined for the full year. So there is a difficulty there, but there are also even more profound difficulties. The fact that academia is not a place of factual knowledge as we might think. It is inhabited by dissensus and debates. There is a large of researchers who have a normative stance and which doesn't go well with this idea of nourishing a process, but do not say what we think that should be done. And sorry, I think there's something. And then something else that I found with this work, which is, well, while spatial justice has a future component, because we are looking towards improvements, which by definition will take time to arrive. We don't know how long, but they are not as yet there, otherwise we'd be already in a just society. This was the first time that I've actually asked people to write about the future, and I've discovered that there are different relationships with the future, and there are people that want to live in the present and do not project themselves in the future because it's quite terrifying. So that's something that is unexpected. I haven't thought about it, so that's something. It's a new difficulty. And then another thing that I hadn't anticipated and came up during interviews that I did, individual interviews that I did after the collective part finished, to understand what had been for people to go through the process. I understood by then that for them, writing a future narrative, because there is fiction in it, it's not that politically engaging, while I was considering that this was all part of the same process of defining a project for a more just space. And then another thing that I've struggled with is that the things that people decide to keep sometimes are just present-day stuff and not that impressive. And this is not that surprising, because we live in a narrative which is bombarding us about ecological transition or social and solidarity economic actions, and citizens will breathe this, so they will not necessarily say something which is outstanding new. And when my role is of the editing what they said and proposing what is more interesting, it's less democratic, but this problem is not there. So this is something that is not resolved for more dynamic processes. And then there is the question of the practice context. Where should we be doing this kind of work? Because these were extremely difficult to manage processes. because of funding, because of risk management, because of logistical complexity, political legitimacy, duration, analytical demands. I am not sure that academia is the best place to do this kind of work, but I also don't know which environments outside academia could be hospital to host this kind of processes. I know that there's a lot of experiences going on, but which would be willing to take in this kind of contributions. I am not too sure about that. And I'm finished. This is just a reference that I will share about the interaction of spatial justice and participatory cinema, because I did some theoretical work on that as well. And that will be it. Thank you for your attention, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ana. Wow. There was a lot of discussion happening already during your talk in the chat. And now you post a lot of different questions. I think we have time to answer your questions, but maybe there are also questions from the rest of the group. I'm wondering if we should stop sharing, stop recording. Would people feel more comfortable? Yes, maybe we do that. Just